The Wise Heart by Jack Kornfield, Chapter 4, The Colorings of Consciousness. This one has a big chart in it. I'm not sure how I'm going to do that when I get to it because it looks like this, and I don't know. We'll see when I get to it. The Colorings of Consciousness. Consciousness is colored by the states that visit it. Speak or act with a deluded mind, and sorrow will follow you, as the wheel follows the ox who draws the cart. Speak or act with a clear mind, and happiness will follow you as closely as your shadow, unshakable. Ajahn Chah would peer at me when I was having a hard time. Caught in some state again. In the forest monastery, we were constantly being directed both to look at consciousness itself and to precisely name the states that rose to fill it throughout the day. Frightened, bored, relaxed, confused, resentful, calm, frustrated, and so forth. Ajahn Chah would sometimes ask us out loud about our states so that we could acknowledge them more clearly. To a recently divorced monk from Bangkok, he chided, "Is there sadness, anger, self-pity? Hey, these are natural. Look at them all." And to a confused English monk, he laughed. "Can you see what's happening? There is distraction, confusion, being in a muddle. They're only mind states, you know. Come on, do you believe your mind states? Are you trapped by them? You'll suffer for sure." Once we became more skilled at noticing, he would up the ante. He would deliberately make things difficult and watch what happened. In the hottest season, he would send us out barefoot to collect alms food on a 10-mile round trip and smile at us when we came back to see if we were frustrated or discouraged. He'd have us sit up all night long for endless teachings without any break and check in on us cheerfully at 4 a.m. When we got annoyed, he'd ask, "Are you angry? Whose fault is that?" In popular Western culture, we are taught that the way to achieve happiness is to change our external environment to fit our wishes. But this strategy doesn't work. In every life, pleasure and pain, gain and loss, praise and blame keep showing up, no matter how hard we struggle to have only pleasure, gain, and praise. Buddhist psychology offers a different approach to happiness, teaching that states of consciousness are far more crucial than outer circumstances. More than anything else, the way we experience life is created by the particular states of mind with which we meet it. If you are watching a high school soccer playoff and your daughter is the nervous goalie, your consciousness will be filled with worry, sympathy, and excitement at each turn of the game. If you are a hired driver waiting to pick up someone's kid, you will see the same sights, the players and ball, in a bored, disinterested way. If you are the referee, you will perceive the sights and sounds in yet another mode. It is the same way with hearing Beethoven, pulling weeds, watching a Woody Allen movie, or visiting Mexico City. Pure awareness becomes colored by our thoughts, emotions, and expectations. Just as when a lute is played upon, the Buddha says, the sound arises due to the qualities of the wooden instrument, the strings, and the exertions of the musician. In the same way do moments of experience and consciousness appear, and having come into existence, pass away. When consciousness is colored or conditioned, it acts like particles, arising and passing, taking on whatever qualities happen to arise with it. It can be felt as a succession of discrete moments, each arising from the present conditions of both mind and senses. As with light or sound, the way in which consciousness arises as discrete, particular moments can be observed. And as Ajahn Chah tried to teach us, some of these moments can also be changed. Here is a fourth principle of Buddhist psychology. Recognize the mental states that fill consciousness. Shift from unhealthy states to healthy ones. To explore this particle-like aspect of consciousness, we will need to look at some of the Buddha's lists, which are among the most detailed maps of human psychology ever developed. For Westerners, this is one of the more challenging aspects of Buddhist psychology. There are hundreds of lists and tables of states and relations. In certain monasteries of Burma and Thailand, especially those that study the refined psychological analysis of the Abhidharma, I have seen blackboards covered with complex diagrams of how subtle states of perception, responses, and consciousness interact at the microscopic level. It looks like a physics class at MIT or a seminar on cybernetics and systems theory. Simply put, the Buddha was a list maker. There are the two truths, the three characteristics, the four foundations of mindfulness, the five hindrances, the six perfections, the seven factors of enlightenment, and the eightfold path. There are lists of 52, 89, and 121 states of consciousness. In later schools of Buddhism, the lists get bigger, with 80,000 verses of wisdom and 84,000 skillful means. Some engineering types, such as Robert Hover, an American who became a meditation teacher in Burma in the 1960s, loved the lists. Alas, for many of us, they bring up a sinking feeling, like memories of badly taught arithmetic or an old obsessive uncle. It's not our way to learn. Nevertheless, these lists served a critical function. Buddhist psychology was originally an oral tradition recited for 500 years before ever being written down. Numbered lists are a traditional mnemonic device, a way to remember the teachings in detail and depth without losing critical information. They were part of the science of the times, ordered and repeated, used in inner experiments of exquisite accuracy for centuries. Even though they now exist as written texts, these lists are still recited from memory and regarded as a precious legacy. Indeed, this form of systematized knowledge was respected not just in India, but throughout the educated cultures of the ancient world. It is recorded that Abdul Qasim Ismail, Grand Vizier of Persia in the 10th century, couldn't bear to part with his 117,000 volume library. When he traveled, these books were carried by a caravan of 400 camels, trained to walk in a way that preserved the library's alphabetical order. To help us understand the momentary colorings of consciousness, Buddhist psychology places them in a three-part system. Described as the all, this system encompasses the whole of our human experience. Part 1 includes all the impressions received through our sense doors. This list is short because our sense experience comprises only 6 things: sights, sounds, tastes, smells, touch and bodily perceptions, and thoughts and feelings. It's worth noticing that in the Buddhist system, the mind is considered to be the sixth sense door, receiving thoughts and feelings and intuitions, just the way the eye receives sights and the ear receives sounds. Part 2 is comprised of the discrete moments of consciousness that receive each sense experience. A fresh corpse also receives sense input, sunlight or breeze on the skin, but there is no consciousness to register it. For us to experience something, there must arise a moment of consciousness at the sense door. These 6 basic particles of consciousness are individual moments of knowing, called respectively eye, ear, tongue, nose, body, and mind consciousness. With the 6 senses and their individual consciousness, we construct our reality, just as an artist can paint the whole world using any combination of the colors red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple. The Buddha explains, "Monks, have you seen a masterwork of painting? That masterwork is designed by the mind, together with the senses. Indeed, monks, the mind is more artistic and creative than any created masterpiece. It is the source of all human creativity." Initially, I thought these lists were archaic and at times arbitrary, but my teachers insisted they could help me understand my direct experience more insightfully. When I received meditation instruction from the Burmese master Mahasi Sayadaw, I was taught to slow down and note the arising and passing of each moment in precise detail. In the monastery dining hall, every second brought new sights, sounds, smells, and thoughts. When I sat down to eat rice and fish curry, I could feel the tug of my robes, hear the changing play of voices from the visitors, and feel and smell the sweat on my body. As I mindfully moved my arm to lift a mango and chew, I became aware of a background commentary of thoughts and feelings. At first, these all blended together, but after months of training in mindfulness, my perception became microscopic. A few minutes contained thousands of moments of sound and ear consciousness, sight and eye consciousness, taste and tongue consciousness, all blended together like the spots of color in an impressionist painting or the dots of light on a television screen to create my experience of lunch. Even now, as you read, you can notice these 6 impressions and the 6 consciousnesses rapidly arising and passing like frames of a movie, one after another. Take a moment, look up from the page, and notice how the book and the ideas it carries disappear from consciousness, replaced by the sights in front of you. Return to this page, and again, after you read this sentence, shift your attention to your bodily sensations: contact with the seat and floor, warmth and cool, tingling, tensions, vibrations. Notice how the book and its contents recede in consciousness as you do. sense impressions and sense consciousnesses are the first two steps in constructing our world. Healthy and unhealthy mental states. To complete this picture of our world, let's go back to the woman watching her daughter play soccer. She sees the game and hears the sounds, each received by eye and ear consciousness. She is also excited, worried, proud, sympathetic. Her sense experiences are colored by many states of mind. These states of mind constitute the third aspect of human experience. These qualities of mind, called mental states, color consciousness. One common list has 52 qualities, while other lists have up to 121. Apparently, between the monasteries, the monks could never fully decide. With every sense impression and the consciousness that receives it, there arise qualities of mind such as worry, pride, and excitement. They arise between the senses and consciousness and add their color to experience. These mental qualities and what they bring to each experience are critical for our happiness. A friend sent Dennis, a real estate broker, to practice at a Spirit Rock meditation class. An attractive man in his late 30s, Dennis had lists of his own, having just broken up with his 17th girlfriend. He was sad because none of them had been quite right. He'd gone through a number of spiritual teachers, too. I was sure I was going to be the next disappointment on his list. Initially, Dennis hated meditation. "Can't I just find another girl?" he asked. I told him to forget the girl and to be mindful of his breath and body. During the following weeks, I asked him to pay attention and mindfully notice not his external experiences, but his mind states, the mental qualities that filled his day. Dennis was not prepared for what he saw. He thought of himself as a happy guy, but he discovered more moments of dissatisfaction than he could have imagined. Along with them were mind states of aversion, boredom, judgment, and anxiety. There were many moments of pleasure, too, but he was surprised by the frequency of dissatisfaction and anxiety. Immediately, Dennis began to judge himself. What's the matter with me? Why can't I be more serene? Now he was dissatisfied with his own mind. When he told me, I laughed and pointed out that he was simply caught in the mind state of being dissatisfied and suffering from it, instead of noticing it as simply a thought. This was a turning point for Dennis, the moment he began to understand the nature of happiness. Finally, Dennis was shifting his focus from outer problems to the inner states that were shaping his experience. Buddhist psychology makes mental health simple for us to understand. The presence of healthy mental states creates a healthy mind. The presence of unhealthy states creates mental distress, unhappiness, and mental illness. This reflects a significant difference with much of Western psychology, which focuses primarily on the residual contents of consciousness, on what we think about. Although this focus has given rise to many creative therapeutic approaches, it often leaves us entangled in the never-ending production of thoughts and emotions. Here, Buddhist psychology takes a liberating turn, stepping back with mindfulness to investigate the play of the mental states themselves, teaching us to release those states that bring sorrow and foster those that create joy. Let's go back to the list of mental factors. The mental factors are divided into three groups. First are 13 common and universal qualities that everyone experiences in most moments. They include stability, life force, memory, feeling tone, pleasant or unpleasant, will, and recognition. These are the basic operating system of the mind. Seeing how these factors arise, we can understand how the mind receives and processes information in a rapid-fire way. Next, and most importantly, we turn our attention to the mental factors that are subject to training. These are divided into healthy states and unhealthy ones. The unhealthy factors have three roots: grasping, aversion, and delusion. From these three roots arise states of envy, rigidity, anxiety, dullness, shamelessness, self-centeredness, doubt, agitation, and misperception. We all experience them at times. The stronger these states are, the more extensively we suffer. At their worst, they create psychopathology. Grasping and greed become addiction. Worry becomes paranoia. Shamelessness becomes sociopathy. Aversion becomes hatred and rage. War, violence, racism, exploitation, and injustice are their fruits. The healthy factors have three healthy roots: love, generosity, and mindfulness. From these three roots arises states of clarity, composure, insight, joy, adaptability, confidence, discretion, and balance. Each of these healthy mental states creates a happy and free mind. They grow from mindful attention, and like sunlight on fog, the presence of these healthy states dissolves the unhealthy ones. Almost all of the myriad Buddhist trainings and practices work to release unhealthy states and cultivate healthy ones. The division of mental qualities into healthy and unhealthy states helps us to see the causes of our happiness and our suffering clearly. It also describes an important psychological truth. Healthy and unhealthy factors are mutually inhibiting. When healthy factors are present, unhealthy ones are not. So when we foster healthy states, unhealthy ones disappear. To work with our mental states, we have to acknowledge how rapidly these states can change, often disappearing without our noticing. Because we are not aware of our inner states, we feel controlled by outside influences. The world will alternately please us or be at fault, and we will be caught in habitual grasping or frustration. There was an article in a San Francisco paper about angry drivers in the nearby town of Pleasanton. It seems the police had trouble with habitual speeders on the main highway. They asked their traffic engineers to create signals that can sense the speed of a car 350 feet before the intersections. Drivers who habitually speed find all the lights turning red in their path. There were a lot of mad drivers. Instant karma, it was called in the press. A better way to travel is to look at our states of mind. Training in mindfulness, we learn to be aware of our own mental states without being caught in them. This capacity for self-reflection is the key to Buddhist psychology. The Buddha asks, how does a practitioner remain established in observation of states of mind in the mind? He instructs, the practitioner becomes aware when the mind is tense and when the mind is relaxed. The practitioner becomes aware when the mind contains hatred and when the mind contains love. The practitioner becomes aware when the mind contains worry and when the mind is composed. When we look at our own mind, we can notice the mental states that predominate as if we were noticing the weather. Just as a storm can bring rain, wind, and cold, we can observe the clusters of unhealthy states that appear on our bad days. We may find resentment, fear, anger, worry, doubt, envy, or agitation. We can notice how often they arise and how attached we are to their point of view. We can also notice the healthy states in our most free and open-hearted periods. We can notice how love, generosity, flexibility, ease, and simplicity are natural to us. These states are important to notice. They give us trust in our original goodness, our own Buddha nature. June came to see me in the middle of a messy divorce. She was especially worried about her 11-year-old daughter. We began by sitting together, not trying to fix anything, but holding the grief and hurt of the whole situation in compassion. Instead of treating her experience as an emergency and trying to change it, we took some deep breaths and settled into the experience of just being present in the moment. With this new spaciousness, I asked June to be mindful of her inner states, what she was feeling and thinking. Immediately, she began to weep. She said her inner life ranged from extreme worry and agitation to self-recrimination, guilt, and anger. She couldn't sleep. She obsessed over an imagined future that had not yet happened. June's doctor had given her tranquilizers, which calmed her somewhat, but still her mind was easily overwhelmed. I invited June to gently acknowledge out loud the states that became present. She began to identify the clusters of angry and fearful mind states as they arose. She could feel how sticky they were, how easy it was to believe the spell they cast. And yet, as we sat and her mindfulness grew stronger, she began to notice that they were not all there was to her life. She laughed a little and realized how long it had been since she'd felt any relief. To support this newfound openness, I suggested to June a whole program including daily sitting meditations using both mindfulness and compassion practices. She also undertook a commitment to practice non-harming, even toward her soon-to-be ex-husband. Each morning, she recited a daily intention of compassion and peace for herself and all she encountered. She simplified her living situation and with some friends began to exercise again. She spent a lot of time with her daughter. I met with June periodically to support the changes that would foster her healthy mind states and help her trust her inner strength and goodness. June went through a long legal process and eventually ended up with enough money and shared custody. Even with the meditations, she said, she suffered and agonized during the whole period. However, because she was suffering so much, she was also motivated to work with her mind. Through her dedication to mindfulness, June began to recognize more and more clearly the fearful and jealous patterns as unhealthy mind states. She noticed how much pain they brought to her body and mind. Because they were toxic and destructive, and because she wanted to live in a more loving way, she slowly began to let them go. Releasing unhealthy conditioning. To become your own psychologist, says Lama Yeshe, you don't have to learn some big philosophy. All you have to do is examine your own mind every day. You already examine material things every day. Every morning you check out the food in your refrigerator. Why not check out the state of your own mind? Investigating your own mind is much more important. We learn to be mindful of mental states. We also begin to see the ways that they are habitual and how conditioned they are. Modern neuroscience tells us that our past reactions are engraved onto the synapses that send messages from one neuron to another, making them more likely to send the same message in the future. Paying attention, we recognize how often a moment's experience is followed by an immediate reaction. It can be shocking to realize how impersonal and habitual our responses are. But gradually we realize that mindfulness gives us the option to choose a healthier response. A meditation student, Jeremy, told me about a difficult encounter with a former friend, Zach, who had betrayed him in a business deal. Previously, whenever Jeremy encountered Zach, he experienced the sight of his friend together with the arising of affection, excitement, and happiness. Now seeing Zach, there arose the mental qualities of anger, sadness, worry, and unhappiness. In these two scenarios, the sense experience of meeting Zach is the same. The critical difference is the mental qualities that arise with the experience. Because he lived nearby, Jeremy regularly encountered Zach. They had tried to talk to each other. They had even tried mediation. Still, the feelings of anger and resentment persisted. At the sight of Zach, there followed an automatic response conditioned by the betrayal. Jeremy could feel his mind and body contract in pain as the memory arose again. With the next encounter, instead of replaying the story of how he had been wronged for the 500th time, Jeremy paused. Feeling the pain, he inquired deeper. Yes, there was hurt, but he had already done what was necessary to prevent further loss. Breathing gently, he could notice that there was no new problem, that his states of mind were the result of past conflict. He breathed again and let the anger and agitation be there, held in mindfulness without feeding them. They began to subside and a quiet relief arose. As his ex-friend walked by, Jeremy could acknowledge the betrayal, but he didn't have to dwell in the unhappy states. In this simple act of looking at his states, Jeremy had taken a step toward understanding and liberation. As Ajahn Chah taught, when you have wisdom, contact with experience is like standing at the bottom of a ripe mango tree. We get to choose between the good and rotten mangoes. It is all to your profit because you know which fruits will make you sick and which are healthy. By training ourselves in mindfulness, we begin to see clearly the healthy and unhealthy fruit. As we practice mindfulness with pleasant and unpleasant experiences, we discover the power of the mindfulness to allow a healthy response to whatever arises. Mindfulness is the king or queen of all the healthy states. It sees what experiences are present and creates the conditions for our natural integrity, love, generosity, and simplicity to arise. With mindfulness of mental states, we can choose whether we practice peace or go to war, whether we want to be imprisoned and stuck or to release the painful states and be healthy. We can let go of the clay and let the gold within us shine. Practice recognizing mental states. Choose a day when you are having difficulties to mindfully observe your mental states like an anthropologist, without judgment or resistance. Usually, several difficult states will appear together. They may include worry, agitation, anger, confusion, grasping, restlessness, and misperception. Determine that 3 times during this day you have deemed difficult. You will carefully notice and track the course of your mental states. Without any judgment, notice which states are present, their level of intensity, how long they last, and how much you are caught up in them. If it is helpful, make notes and write them down. Do this again on 2 more such days. After 3 days, sense what effect the mindful acknowledgement of difficult states has had. If it has been illuminating or released you from their grip, continue the practice. Next, in the same way, look for a day that you feel to be most positive and start to mindfully observe the healthy states that are present. You can review the healthy mental factors on page 54. That's that chart. You may notice states of balance, clarity, flexibility, graciousness, love, wisdom, confidence, or joy. Notice the predominant states, their level of intensity, how long they last, and whether there is grasping of them. Again, if helpful, make notes. Do this again on 2 more such days. After 3 days, sense the effect this mindful acknowledgement of healthy states has had. Recognize that you can be aware of and support these healthy states with your attention. Now that you have learned to do so, continue this practice. Tomorrow, chapter 5.